Hitler's army destroyed or captured a lot of factories and military plants in the western part of Russia, but Russians were able to evacuate some of them to east. The small plant in Birobidzhan that was insignificant a few months ago had become one of the most valuable plants in the country. Since all the men were drafted to the war, the women and grown children replaced them at their jobs to work for the war. However, some jobs required skilled men and strong muscles that neither women nor children could provide. One of those jobs was a blacksmith. Since very few people could perform that job, Samuel was recalled from the draft just a few months after the beginning of the war. He was lucky. He was alive and could stay with his family. For an extremely small salary, people worked for 15 to 20 hours a day without breaks. In addition, the government forced them to lend up to 50% of their salaries to the government, promising to repay it later. In reality, the government would never return the money. Life was extremely tough, but Sarah and Samuel couldn't complain because they were in a better situation than the others. They both received a salary, and most importantly, they were together living with their children. Daniel was 15 years old, too young to be drafted but old enough to work in a plant. Sarah and Samuel expected him to start working. But Daniel didn't want to leave the school. Public schools, colleges, and universities weren't closed, but not that many students attended because it was not a very good time for education. All the fathers were at war, and children had to replace adults' jobs, leaving no opportunity to study. Daniel loved school because it was the only place he could enjoy reading and learning everything he could. Regardless, his parents insisted him to start working. "You've got to find a job and take care of yourself. I started working at the age of 13. But you're 15 already and still hanging on my shoulders. Enough is enough. Go find a job." "But, Dad, I want to finish school. Let me stay with you for another couple of months. Please," Daniel begged. "You want us to die? It's not a good time. When the war is over, you'll finish your school. I expect you to come to work with me tomorrow." However, Daniel didn't want to be a blacksmith and disobeyed his father. Instead, he went to a local elementary public school to look for a job. "We already have enough people to clean the school," the principal said. "I don't want to work as a cleaner. I want to be a teacher," Daniel replied. "A what? A teacher?" Daniel was short and looked like a 12-year-old. The principal was surprised, but didn't show him the door. He needed teachers badly. All the teachers were at war. What could this boy offer me? He thought. "How old are you?" "I'm 16. 16? The director smirked. "Do you have a birth certificate?" Yes, but I left it home." "Comrade principal, I know that I'm small. It's because I didn't have enough food. I can teach children. I know mathematics. Physics is my favorite. I can teach the Russian language and literature. I know many things. Please, give me an opportunity, and I'll prove that I can do this. Please." "All right, I'll hire you without your birth certificate, but I need your school graduation certificate." "I'm sure you have one." "Yes, I do, but I don't have it with me," Daniel lied. He didn't have the chance to finish school. "Okay, then bring it to me. And I'll hire you." Daniel went to the high school principal, naively hoping to ask him for a certificate in advance. "My father wants me to quit school and work with him as a blacksmith. But I know that I can do better than this, and you know it too. I don't want to quit school. I found a job in a public school, but they want my graduation certificate. Would you, please, give it to me in advance? I promise I'll finish the last grade. You know that I'm a good student." "Daniel, how can you finish your education if you work during the day? We don't have evening classes." "I'd love to help you, young man, but I can't." Daniel decided to apply for evening classes at a local college, but they also asked him for a high school graduation certificate. That night, The shadow of a teenager crossed a schoolyard and the sound of broken glass scared a sleeping flock of birds. They flew to the nearest tree and everything became silent again. The shadow slowly moved through the school corridor into the principal's office. Hands were rushing through the drawers until blank certificates and a rubber stamp was found. A stamp was quickly pressed onto the blank certificate and placed back into the drawer. Then, the shadow quickly moved back through the same broken window. Nobody even noticed a shortage of certificates, and their only suspicion that one of the students who'd received a bad grade broke the window. The elementary school principal was holding a high school graduation certificate in his hands, well aware that it was a fake document. The stamp is genuine, he thought. But it looks like a child wrote it. It's not necessary to be an expert in handwriting analysis to see that this is a fake document. I know the signature of the elementary school principal, he said, watching the desperate boy in front of him. This is not his signature. He tried to figure out how he could have possibly obtained this document. Can you explain it to me? Daniel quivered his shoulders, not knowing what to say. Somehow he got it. He is definitely a special boy. The principal thought. I'm not risking anything. If he fails to perform the job, I'll fire him. I'm not a KGB agent to open an investigation regarding the diploma. Also, if somebody found out, I could say that I didn't notice. All right, young man. I'll give you an opportunity. And you better work hard. I'll see you tomorrow at 8:30, he said finally. Wow, it worked. Daniel thought with excitement, and immediately headed to the local college to apply for the evening classes. The college receptionist didn't even look inside the certificate, and Daniel was admitted. He was not ready to go to college because he didn't have enough knowledge. But he was confident that he could study on his own, and he was not mistaken. Soon, he became one of the best students in college, and one of the best teachers at the elementary school. Sarah and Samuel were happy for Daniel, mostly because he started to make enough money to support himself and help them. They were the luckiest family among all others. Not yet knowing that tragedy would twirl them into despair. Dear Sarah and Samuel, Lev wrote them a letter. Sarah, I'm looking for your sister, Fega. I hope that she, the kids, my parents, and sister Yalta evacuated and might live with you or close to you. Or maybe you know their location. I hope they are alive and well. I wish I could write you a happy letter, but I can't. I have bad news. I wish I could be there with them to comfort them all. I'm anxious to know if they are safe. I miss everybody. I don't even know how to bring it to them and to you. My brother, Fega's husband, David, was killed in the war. They sent me the letter because I was the only one from our family who they could reach. The Germans occupied Kharkiv, and it's impossible to find out if they evacuated and where. My mom has a heart condition. I'm not sure if she has to know it now, maybe later. I'm sorry to bring you more bad news. I think that you already know it, but I just want to give you more details. I received a letter from my Betty, recently. She wrote that Samuel's brother, Simon, was killed in front of her eyes. She wrote that he was very brave and kind. He died saving her life. I know that Riva is the same age as my parents, so I'm not sure if you have to tell her now, maybe later, when the war is over. It's very hard to bear the death of a son. Please write to me. How are you doing? I hope for the end of the war. Victory will be ours. Hugs, Lev. Lev's battalion fought the Germans at the Leningrad front in the deadliest swamps that sucked in and drowned a lot of soldiers who accidentally stepped left or right off a safe path. The Germans bombed systematically, not letting the Soviets out of the swamp for several weeks, causing severe suffering from sickness and starvation. A bomb exploded close to Lev, throwing him away from the safety of the path. He lost consciousness, falling into the deadly swamp. The marsh started to suck him in, and his body slowly disappeared under the peat bog. It took him a few seconds to regain consciousness, and he felt sharp pain in his stomach. He was about to cry for help, but the muddy water covered his mouth. Lev had no chance of survival. But his brother soldiers watched one after another. They threw a rope over his head, he grabbed it, and they pulled him out to firm ground. Lev was wounded badly, but alive. The Soviet battalion retreated under the Germans' attack, unable to take Lev with them. He stayed in the swamp, surrounded by dead bodies and wounded soldiers. When the front line moved beyond the swamp, Lev heard the sound of the approaching Germans and single shots. They shot the wounded and dead, to make sure that they were dead. Lev needed to hide desperately, though there was no hiding place anywhere around. He still had a rope that his soldier brothers threw to him to pull him out of the swamp. Lev tied it to a tree trunk, held another end, and moved into the deadly mud. The swamp started sucking him in as the Germans came closer. When he heard them approach, as his body was already covered with mush, he pulled the rope just enough to hold his face above the swamp surface. He saw the first German, took a big breath and let the rope loose, deepening into the mud, but he was a little late. The German spotted him, pulled a revolver and shot. The bullet went through Lev's right palm, causing terrible pain. He lost the end of the rope and went deeper in the deadly marsh as the Germans walked away. Lev turned his body and reached the rope end with his left hand and pulled himself to the surface of the swamp. The Russians captured the swamp again the next day, but were unable to take Lev to safety. The swamp was captured back and forth several times by both the Germans and the Russians. Every time the Germans came, Lev submerged himself into the marsh over and over again. It was the fourth day that Lev had stayed in mud. He was wounded, starving, and exhausted. He had run out of strength. He was dying. He didn't hear explosions anymore and didn't feel pain in his wounds. The feeling of hunger disappeared. He just lay there under the tree, thinking about her beautiful eyes. They were as green as the leaves on the tree. Her smile was as shiny as the rays of the sun that were coming down on him through the tree branches. He felt her body aroma, and her touch was so warm and pleasant. He stretched his hand to touch her face. "Talisman," he called. "I'm here, my love," she said. Lev opened his eyes and here she was in a white blur, smiling at him. "Am I dead?" he asked, but her lovely girlish laugh brought him back to reality. "No, you are not dead. You are in the hospital." Lev lifted his head from the pillow to look around. Indeed, he was in a hospital. "Betty, how did you know? Your comrades captured the swamp and found you. They thought you were dead at first, but then you called my name. So they knew you were alive, and brought you here. They found my picture in your packet. Miraculously, they could read my address on the back of it, even though the picture was almost destroyed by the water. So, they sent me a letter, and my chief doctor transferred me here temporarily to work in this hospital so that I could take care of you. You were out for too long." "Yes. I guess I missed all the fun. Your wounds were badly infected. I was afraid you wouldn't survive." She laughed through her tears. "Oh, my girl. I wouldn't upset you with my death." He touched her face, as if it was in a dream. "You were lucky because they injected you with penicillin. It's a new medication. If not for this, you would die. People with your wounds never survive." They spent all night making love, talking, and sharing their stories. What a wonderful moment it was. "I promised you to come to Leningrad," she said, stroking her fingers through his hair. "So, here I am. I wish I could give you a tour. I promise to do it some other time. It's a great city." "I guess it is. I've never been in Leningrad before. This is my first time." I always thought of it as a beautiful city, with gigantic monuments and stunning palaces, but I don't see any of it now. There are only ruins, buildings with broken windows, and camouflage everywhere. There are not that many people on the streets. Children are not playing, and there are no men. There are only skinny women slowly making their way alone. It's not a pretty picture, is it? Lev asks. No, it's not, but we fight to make it better, don't we? She smiled at him. Yes, we do, and we will. And then, I'll buy you a stunning white dress and a wedding gown, and I'll wear my parade uniform with all my medals. We'll have a flower boy who will carry all your medals on a small red pillow. Also, we'll have a flower girl who will carry the wedding rings on a small white pillow. And I'll marry you, if, of course, you don't find another candidate. Betty giggled. I won't. You are and always will be the only one suitable for this. How many children do you want to have? I don't know, she blushed. I never had time to think about it. So, think now. We have plenty of time till morning to think about it. Betty laughed quietly. He was so much fun and a joy to be with. I want a son, she said. My father always wanted a son. When I was a girl. He was a very successful businessman, and sometimes, when I got lazy and didn't study hard enough, he told me in a very serious manner, daughter, I expect you to study as a man because I don't have a son, and it's your responsibility to take care of the business when I'm old. Barry imitated her father in a low voice. Oh, I miss him so much. Lev embraced her into his arms. As soon as the war is over, I'll give you a son. I promise. Lev recovered quickly and had to say goodbye. He didn't want to leave Betty and could quit the army because of his permanent disability. However, he wanted to get back to his brother soldiers to help them to fight the enemy. Also, getting back to the front meant more to eat. He starved in the hospital, even though Betty shared her bread with him. Lev was unable to use any weapon because his right hand was permanently injured. Therefore, he was assigned to be a truck driver on the road of life. That road was over the southern part of the frozen Lake Ladoga. His job was to deliver food to the blockaded city and take evacuees away from the city, crossing the lake in a truck. Lev never drove a truck before. When he drove it the first time, the truck was packed with evacuees. The Germans bombarded the lake non-stop, weakening the ice. The inexperienced driver startled every time the explosion erupted, turning the steering wheel sharply to the right or to the left, pressing on the gas or brake pedals, speeding or stopping abruptly. The truck slipped, slid, skidded, and then got stuck in the snow. Any delay could cost people their lives. They jumped off the truck and pushed it out, saving their lives, and then continued their harsh journey. A bomb exploded right in front of the truck. Miraculously, Lev managed to stop it before it went under the ice into the water. His heart raced and his hands glued to the steering wheel in fear. Lev sat at the wheel, recovering from the shock. The ice cracked in front of the truck. It was impossible to cross the lake. We have to go back, he announced in distress. There is no way back. People cried. Drive along the ice crack. You can do it, soldier. They encouraged him. So, he did. The ride was long and dangerous. The Germans continued to bomb the lake. Lev was lucky. He survived the ride. And many more rides as dangerous as this one. However, a lot of other truck drivers were killed on the way and many trucks fell under the ice, drowning drivers and passengers. In January 1943, the Soviet army finally broke the Leningrad siege. The tide of the war turned and the Soviet army launched a counter-offensive. Betty and Lev served in different divisions. But they both moved to the same destination west, to Germany.